Hey guys, Tarke, missing a cat, and here we're looking at the Mage artifact and talents breakdown. Now, before we get into it, two quick things. One, I'm still really ill, so bear with me. I will need to drink as my voice is already disappearing. And two, apologies to the guy who I told I was doing the monk stuff today. They haven't data mined the Brewmaster monk stuff yet, so there's no point only doing half of a class and having to go back to them. So, anyway, Mage. Now, we're going to start off with Arcane, obviously. A. Following the trends from the Death Knight, I'm assuming lots of boring static, then one or two interesting. So, increase the damage dealt. Yep. Your Arcane Barrage can now bounce up to 5 times. If it successfully bounces 5 times, it will explode in a supernova, dealing massive damage. Okay, now without looking into the talents, this implies that supernova, this may be the same supernova that you got from the Nova tier, so that's pretty cool. The fact it says bounces is quite interesting. They don't say if it can bounce multiple times. So, for example, if there were two mobs, if it could hit one, then bounce back and forwards, or if it requires 5 separate monsters to be up. We don't know, but still, it's interesting, right? Increase the damage, pretty boring. Increase the chance of arcane spells to critically strike. It's something. You don't necessarily think of arcane and crit, but you know, okay. Increase arcane damage dealt by 5%. Increase the damage dealt by your arcane explosion. Maybe we're going to start using arcane explosion again. That'd be nice. Increase the range of your arcane explosion, so we would hope. Increase the damage dealt by arcane missiles by 5%. Arcane missiles now fires X additional. Well, at least this one's kind of interesting. As I was saying yesterday in the Death Knight one, we like stuff which changes gameplay rather than just, oh, X%. Like, I think we would all prefer, you know, you now shoot 2 extra missiles rather than increasing the missile damage by just a flat percent. It's just more interesting. Increase your chance to trigger arcane missiles. Increase the duration of arcane power. Reduce the cooldown of your blink. Wow, that's pretty powerful. That's very powerful, in fact, actually. Reduce damage you take by X. Again, this was standard in all of the artifacts we looked at yesterday. I think everyone just flat takes less damage, which kind of raises the question of if everyone has a tier which just like you take less damage, why bother having it? Because everything is just scaled around it, if that makes sense. Increase your mana pool by X%. Basically, gnomes are overpowered. Your arcane spells have a chance to summon an image of Aegwyn to assist you. Okay, that's pretty cool. If you don't know, Aegwyn is Medivh's mother. She was a guardian, lore stuff. Basically, you're getting the Hellfire Citadel 4 set bakes into your artifact because people probably really liked it. Your evocation makes you invulnerable and causes you to deal massive damage based on the mana your evocation restores. Okay, I wonder if that is a like explosion at the end there, or it's a buff, but still it's pretty interesting. When you reach for arcane charges, you're infused with the power of Aegwyn. Okay, so they've gone really heavy with this whole Aegwyn theming. Again, the arcane artifact, if I remember correctly, is her staff. One of the staff she uses as a guardian, so it kind of makes sense that they're going so heavy with this theme. So before we look into fire, let's go into the talents and see. Hopefully we'll have nice cross synergy, and hopefully they're well designed. We hope. So, Arcane Familiar, 1 minute cooldown. Summon a familiar that attacks your enemies. A familiar attacks have a chance to grant you an arcane charge. Pretty helpful. This companion cannot be targeted or damaged by enemies. Lasts 30 seconds. So basically what they've done is they've just straight up ripped this spell from D3, as they've done with pretty much every single class. I'll be interested to see if it has the same model. Hopefully not, because the familiar models in D3 were a bit bland. Static. 1 minute cooldown. Once activated, the next 4 arcane blasts you cast will be instant. That's pretty good. That will be very good on the polar fights, because you can just instantly ramp up and get your 4 charges, and obviously it gives you a very nice burst with like your pre-pop. Pretty good in something like PvP as well. So you can already see, again, this is something we saw with the Death Knights, is they are trying to tier the first row of talents. It seems to just be something they do with the first row, where you have kind of like a passive or something which does it all for you. So for example, this Arcane, you don't really have any control of it. It just passively generates you charges, you know, and you just press the button once a minute. This something you have more control over. You need to think about when is the correct time to use it, so it requires slightly more planning. So it would reward people who know when they need to quickly build up those Arcane Blasts again, so which I like. And then Torrent. When Arcane Barrage hits additional targets, the damage dealt to those targets is increased by 100%. And then you get something like that, which just completely ruins the tier, right? So, okay, let's just break this down a little bit. So this is just like you AoE more, yeah? And then you've got 2 which are all around generating arcane charges, which makes sense. So like you would assume it's your arcane charge generation tier. And then they've just thrown that in. So I'm not a massive fan of this design, because basically what this will mean is, unless this is like incredibly undertuned, which it can't be because it's just 100% damage, whenever there's an AoE scenario, you just take this talent and you only take the other 2 on single target fights, which is kind of a shame, because the other 2 are more interesting, because this is just, you do a flat, you have no control, it's just you do flat more damage. Flat damage, not that interesting. The other 2 are far more interesting. Please retweak that. Shimmer. When you take damage, there's a 30% chance for the cooldown of Blink to be reset. This effect cannot occur more than once every 30 seconds. Cool. It could be a powerful, interesting ability, but it's in the tier with both Cauterize and Ice Block, so the only reason you would ever take this is for leveling. Just because you get to move quicker and running old raids. But you'd nearly always rather have Ice Block or Cauterize in both a raiding and a PvP scenario. I mean, again, for raiding, you have Cauterize, which is the I don't know what I'm doing option. This is the you don't need to worry about it. This will hopefully save you. Movement sorting effects. Hang on, I think they've changed it a little bit. Fatal damage will instead bring you to 35% health and burn you for 20% of your max health over 6 seconds. So it won't even kill you anymore. It used to kill you. So it used to like heal you to say 20% and then deal, all of your damage. Now you don't even need healing. You will survive. While burning, movement swing effects are suppressed and your movement speed is increased by 150%. Come on, guys. Like, they've removed the negative aspect of this skill, which I'm not a massive fan of. It's a lot better now because it has that speed boost inbuilt. So, yeah, I mean, it's good. Like, you stand in the fire, right? The fire kills you. You then get set on fire. You res, and you get movement speed so you can run out of the fire. Cool. Ice block, 5-minute recharge. 2 charges baseline. You become encased in a block of ice, protecting you from all attacks and damage for 10 seconds. But during that time, you cannot attack when you will cast spells. Causes hypothermia for you to recast against for 30 seconds. But it hasn't really changed that much, except for you now have 2 charges as baseline, 5-minute recharge. Yeah, basically, as I said, the people who know what they're doing are just going to take Ice Block by default. There might be 1 or 2 scenarios where Cauterize might be slightly better because you need to... Okay, so for example, let's say in a fight like Zul'Harak in Hellfire Citadel, where you have people who need to be like moving all over the place rapidly, there might be a fight designed in Legion where a mage is very good at doing one thing and they need to soak an ability on one side of the room, then quickly get to the other, right? If that's your job, you could use Cauterize, you could, blink over to the other side of the room, get 1 shot, Cauterize keeps you alive, and you speed boost back. So there might be like 1 or 2 niche cases where Cauterize is better than Ice Block, but generally you just want Ice Block because the whole point of Ice Block is you could do the exact same thing if you go to the other side of the room, you take the 1-hit ability, but you press Ice Block first, you don't die, you then come back and everyone's chill and you've still got another charge, you can do it again. So, Shimmer, too long didn't read. Shimmer's the most interesting of the 3, but you're just going to pick Ice Block anyway, or Cauterize if you don't want to manage it. So, it's a little disappointed. I think this should just be a passive, because it's got an inbuilt cannot occur more than once every 30 seconds. So, people would say, oh, that's, OP for PvP, but if you look at some of the other things they're doing with PvP, it looks like it's going to be OP anyway. So, just make that a baseline, please. Mirror Image, 2-minute cooldown, creates 3 copies of the caster nearby, which casts spells and attacks the mage enemies, last 40 seconds. Nothing's changed that much. Rune of Power, the worst designed ability in the game, places a Rune of Power on the ground for 3 minutes, which increases your spell damage by 15% while you stand within 8 yards. You may place up to 2 Runes of Power at one time. Okay, so at least... I don't know if this is the current iteration. I haven't played by Mage since very early WoD, and I didn't run Rune because I only PvP'd on that character, and Rune plus PvP is just no. But at least now you don't need to be stood inside the Rune. You have that 8-yard buffer. But still, it's one of those things of... I don't think anyone enjoys casting Rune. And the big thing is you want fantasy, right? Like, that's what they keep saying. Oh, you want the fantasy of being a mage. Is there that much fantasy in casting a rune, and when you stand the rune you do more damage? Maybe, but basically what that equates to is boring gameplay, because in your raid you're always on the move, you're always having to recast runes, it maths out as better, so it just becomes a chore. Like, you just remove this, please, Blizz, just remove it. What would be more interesting, right? Let's keep the fantasy. Put Rune of Power on a cooldown. You place a Rune of Power at your feet, and it follows you for a minute. That would be better, right? Like, if for 1 minute, you know, you need to burst, like a burst phase, you pop it's on your feet, that's it, and put like a 3-4 minute cooldown on it. Solved, right? Just do that. No one likes it. Ice Blaze. In before I get like spams, people say this is the best skill in the game. Anyway, Ice Blaze. 20-second recharge, 3 charges. Your next mage spell can be cast while moving, castable while another spell is in progress, and unaffected by the global cooldown, max 3 charges. Why have you put all 3 of these in the same tier? So we have Mirror Image, which is just a flat, you deal more damage on a 2-minute cooldown. We have Rune of Power, which you have to have skill managing standing still. And then you have Ice Flows, which lets you DPS on the move. Basically, unless Mirror Images maths out as being better than Ice Flows, you just take Ice Flows in nearly every single encounter. When there is an encounter where you're allowed to stand completely still, then Rune of Power's almost definitely better than Mirror Image, but it's basically just Mirror Image or Ice Flows. It seems like an odd tier to just have a flat DPS, a stationary buff, and then a mobility buff, if that makes sense. So, you know. At least there's some thought going into it, right? It's not completely binary, but a bit odd. Right, Incanter's Flow. Magical energy flows through you while in combat, building up to 20% increased damage, and then diminishing down to 4% increased damage, cycling every 10 seconds. It hasn't really changed since its current iteration. Just a passive. If you're very good, you can manage it. I remember there used to be a lot of skill playing as a fire mage, and saving up your Pyro Blast when you hit the 20%. The cat's just entered in now. Scrap you. Hello. Goodbye. So, yeah, boring passive, but there is at least some gameplay element to timing your burst around the 20% buff. Charged Up. 30-second cooldown. When activated, generate 4 arcane charges. This is really good. It works in a very similar fashion to Static, because the whole point is you'd use something like Static on the pull to instantly get your 4 charges. Now you can just use Charged Up to do the same thing. It's a good ability. It basically means you can burst harder as an arcane mage. You can set up your damage quicker. Yeah, it's good. I would argue, could maybe just be a baseline ability. Excuse the cat running around, but oh well. Words of Power. Channeling Evocation now grants 1 arcane charge every 1.5 seconds. Again, if we go back to the artifact, there is the Evocation makes you invulnerable and causes you to deal massive damage based on the mana your Evocation restores. And if we quickly look into the skill tree, we just try and see what the current cooldown of it is. They might have changed it. Evocation. So a 1.5 minute cooldown now. So again, keep in mind, you may not even need Ice Block as an Arcane Mage, because you have Evocation as Ice Block. Because, again, when we're talking raiding, not PvP, because you can just interrupt in PvP. But for raiding, you've got a 1.5 minute invulnerable. So you've basically got a 1.5 minute Ice Block, but you do a lot of damage, and it's tied to your damage, so maybe you don't want to waste it soaking abilities. So maybe you still would want Ice Block in that kind of scenario. But yeah, no, think about that, because it means that as a mage, you can potentially be invulnerable for like most of the important bits of fights. So if you think about a fight where there is just heavy raid damage for that section, if you're a mage, you're laughing because you're just like evocate, ice block, evocate, hypothermia wears off, ice block, and it's like you took no damage. But anyway, so what this does is you generate arcane charges, so you'll be at full charges at the end of it, which is good because it then means that your massive explosion of arcane or your buff, or again, they haven't said what this like massive damage is, but you'd want your arcane buff up for that. And if you don't generate arcane charges, by the time you finished your evocation, you would have lost your charges. So there's clearly some cross synergy between those two. So we like that. That's good. Supernova. Creates a pulse of arcane energy around the target enemy or ally, dealing 190% of spell power, arcane damage to all enemies within 8 yards. Knocking them upwards, a primary enemy target will take 100% increased damage. Hasn't changed as far as I'm aware. Basically just a powerful move. And then they've put it alongside crowd control, which doesn't make sense to me. The only reason they could do this is maybe for 5-mans, because they're pushing challenge mode so hard that, in challenge modes it would be OP to have both Supernova and Ring of Frost and Ice Ward. You could technically call Supernova CC because it has the knock-up, but it's a knock-up which has a ridiculous amount of damage and has a shorter cooldown. Then why would you ever pick, even in PvP, right? Because in raiding, you just pick Supernova all the time. Even in PvP, would you take Ring of Frost over Supernova? Or would you take Ice Ward over Supernova? I don't think you would, because Supernova just does a load of damage. Does it have the 2 charges? Okay, so it doesn't have 2 charges anymore. But it does a load of damage and is, an interrupt. Maybe in RBGs you'd have one mage take Ring anyway. Points for everyone noticing the slight little edits on my nose getting redder and redder. Being ill is fun. But yeah, so you just take Supernova in every case. So again, in 5-mans, would you rather have a second Frost Nova or Ring of Frost? No, Ring of Frost would just be better. And would you rather have Supernova? Or it's just, I don't know, I think it's a bad tier because you just take this in both raiding, 5-mans, and PvP. Except for maybe that one niche RBG scenario where you want Ring. But poorly designed tier. Nether Tempest. Place a Nether Tempest on target, which deals 40.90% of spell damage, arcane damage over 12 seconds to the target, and 3.41% of spell power times 12 to all enemies within 10 yards. Basically does damage. Limit 1 target, damage increased by 50% per arcane charge at cast time, so you'll have 4. So it does 200% more damage. Basically, it's an AoE, which pulses. Okay. Arcane Blast, Fireball, and Frostfire Bolt have a chance to explode on impact, dealing an additional 50% damage to the target, to all other enemies within 8 yards. Depending on how these two... So it's a 15% chance for Arcane. Depending on how these two math out, this again might be a case of, an easy-to-maintain AoE versus slightly more complicated... because you just passively AoE, right? So, again, this only works if Nether Tempest maths out at doing more damage. If Nether Tempest maths out at doing more damage than the Unstable Magic Explosions, then I like that design. If you're more experienced, you are good at keeping your Nether Tempest up, weaving it into your rotation, this will be better for you. If you don't really know what you're doing, you just take Unstable Magic and you just passively AoE. I like that. That is good design. Enemies hit by Arcane Barrage have a chance to throw a barrage at a nearby enemy. If you take that, you then go with this, so then you have a full barrage spec, and again that would have very good synergy with your Arcane Barrage can now bounce 5 times. So you can sort of see how they've kind of gone for the more fantasy option of do you want to be like Khadgar at the opening of WoD and just like barrage, everything falls over, you go for Cascade. But a lot of that will depend. We don't know what the chance is, so depending on the chance, depending on the maths, there might just be a this is the best one. But still, I like how there's, you know, these two which you kind of need to manage your AoE. Yeah, okay, it's a passive chance, but you need to plan when to barrage and barraging at the right time. So there's two sort of planned ones, one of which will just math out being better, and then there's one which is just about blur. So I kind of like that. I also kind of like how these two might reward different stat priorities. So you might have a build based around stacking loads of haste, so you are constantly resetting your arcane barrages, getting up to 4 stacks, dumping them all, rebuilding. We don't know. Again, just speculation, but I like it. So this is a much better tier than that tier, for example. Overpowered. Casting arcane missiles extends arcane power by 2 seconds. Cool. Quickening. Arcane Blast. And actually, no. I really don't like this tier. It's good. I can tell that it's good, but it's not interesting. And you want your end game talents to be interesting, you know. I miss the days of you get to like max level and you like we're talking like BC and stuff, like BC and Wrath, or whenever they had the old talents, right? You get to the final point, you click it and you get this really cool ability. I prefer that to like just a passive. But anyway. Quickening, Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles also grant 2% haste for 6 seconds stacking. This effect is cleared when you cast Arcane Barrage. That is a more interesting passive. Like, this is an example. You can do passives if they're interesting. The other one I don't think is that interesting. It's powerful there. And then Arcane Orb. Launches an Arcane Orb forward from the Mage's position, travelling up to 40 yards and dealing 74.3% of spell power. Arcane damage to enemies it passes through grants the Mage an Arcane Charge when cast every time it deals damage. One thing I will say, Arcane Orb is a very cool spell. Everyone I know who's played Arcane in WoD has loved this spell. They haven't got to use it very much because most of the time it's been the bad option, just because it didn't math out as being better than the other two, or it was only good in some fights. It's a really cool spell. It just straight up adds to the rotation. Make it baseline. Just make it baseline, get another passive, and just have a full passive tier. I don't know. Overall, there are some options which I like. There are still some really, like, I would say 1, 2, 3. Like, these 3 tiers are poorly designed. Just because, like, the options seem so obvious. But otherwise, decent, right? And I do like how there is some, like, very small synergy between some of the artifacts and some of the talents. So, you know, we've got to give them some props for that. Alright, so let's look at the weapons. I'm not gonna lie, I found most of the staffs pretty bland, to be honest. I mean, these, again, once they're fully animated, it might look really cool, but I'm not that sold on them. Again, slightly better. This one has potential, because it looks like this bit rotates. Yeah, it looks like they rotate or something, so that could be cool. I'm not even sure if I like this Thunderstaff, because the Thunderstaff, it's a cool model, but it doesn't scream arcane, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think it really fits the theme. But it's a cool model. I like the model, but it doesn't say Arcane Mage to me. This seems kind of cool. Again, like, low res, it doesn't do it justice. I'm assuming it looks way cooler in game. And we've got these like orb things, which I'm again spin round or something. It reminds me a lot of the Cho'Gall's Twilight Hammer. You know, it's like the head of that staff just looks like the hammer with all the spikes. It looks actually really similar to that. But anyway, fire. So fire, just before we get into it, has always been my favourite mage spec. I've played fire mages for multiple expansions. Fingers crossed. I want to go back to playing fire. I was really disappointed in what they did with it in WoD, and I just completely abandoned the class after a few weeks of playing it. So, please. Your fireball dispels X beneficial magical effects. PvP. again, this is something I noticed. Sorry to keep referencing, but something I noticed looking at the DK video yesterday, where both Frost and Blood just had very boring passives, and then they had Unholy, which had your Death Grip roots and stuff like that. It seems that they seem to be doing this with every spec, where it's just like, now you have this. Very good. When you cast 4 consecutive Scorches, you gain Pyroblast, making your next Pyroblast spell instant cast free and deal 3% of damage. Wow. Okay, see, this I like, right? Because this is basically, you can cheat the crit chance. So if you have bad crit, you can just spam Scorch, which is what you used to do when Scorch dealt damage. But then for some reason in Miss and Wad, they decided to nerf Scorch into the ground, so it did no damage. I remember early WoD, I would press Scorch, and the enemies would passively regen more than the damage I was dealing. Again, PvP, so I like that. That's good. Inferno Blast now applies Crucible of Flames, dealing additional damage over 9 seconds. That's cool. We'd have to know what that like debuff is, but that's cool. Unless the debuff is just it does damage. But anyway. Every consecutive critical strike increases your critical strike damage by 15%. Wow. That to me seems like a very cool, very powerful, but very like bad talent, because we have this issue at the moment with expansions where usually fire starts off really weak because they have no crit chance, and then at the end of the expansion they're the best thing in the world, and that just screams fire is the best thing in the world once they reach X% crit. But still, it's way more interesting than you just do flat like 10% more damage. You periodically accumulate flame orbs. Casting Pyroblast with an active flame orb will trigger a Phoenix Bolt. Dude. Okay, so we need to know how many flame orbs we can have up at once. We need to know exactly what Phoenix Bolt is. But can you see how this is so much more interesting than what we just looked at? Like, the first 5 are all interesting. Reduce the cast time of your Fireball. That's really powerful because it's amazing for PvP. 2, it's amazing for raiding. The more you cast, the more you crit. That is just more interesting than if that could quite easily read your Fireball does 20% more damage. That is more interesting. That is more impactful. Like, you'll be hyped to getting that node on your artifact weapon. Your Inferno Blast spreads damage over time effects to additional X targets. Pyroblast does an additional X%. Okay, increases fire damage by X%. When you cast Flame Strike, you will trigger X additional times. So basically, we don't know how many times, but, you know, let's assume 3. Otherwise, they've said 1 more time. So you, like, cast it, and then it'll, like, shock out 3 more times. That's really cool. I hope the animation triggers as well. Your Fireball does boring, increase damage at night, boring. When you blink, you heal. Wow, that's really powerful. So we can see it's a heal over time. We don't know the numbers, but it's like da-da-da. Increase the damage reduction of your Molten Armor by math. Okay, so again, you're having a flat damage reduction. It seems that everyone gets flat damage reduction. Before we continue, way better, Blizz. Way, way better. This is what we want to see, right? There's still a few boring modes in there, like just increased Fireball damage, but this is way, way better. Good job. So yeah, we haven't seen Frost yet. I am looking at this cheekily, but by far Fire, I'm excited to maybe pick up Fire again. I've been tanking for most of WoD. Sorry, Guild, I might be going Fire Mage. Hopefully the talents are good. Right, let's swap this over to Fire. Again, we're seeing a lot of similarities. I'm not a big fan of the classes which have like 2 tiers of importance, and then like 3 or 4 copy-pasted tiers. But hopefully they'll be a bit more interesting than that. So, casting Pyroblast while Hot Streak is active has a 50% chance to instantly reactivate Hot Streak. Hot Streak is basically when you crit, you gain a stack, and then when you get 2, you can do the instant Pyro. So it says, casting Pyroblast while Hot Streak is active has a 50% chance to instantly reactive. So basically you rebuild those crits quicker. You've got a chance to get like another crit, which is cool. So you might be like chaining pyros, assuming your pyro crits as well in that proc. You then throw out another pyro, then it might like chain trigger, so that's cool. Enemies affected by Ignite have a chance to flare up for 3 seconds, while flared up, nearby enemies take 100% spell damage every second. Okay, so basically just an AoE talent. Fireball has an X chance to chain to a nearby. Wow. So we've got, again, kind of odd. We've got 2 AoE talents and then a single target talent, which will get better the later into the expansion. Because early on, when you don't have the crit, proccing that second hot streak isn't any good unless you can force the crit again. So this is something you would take later on. So for the first tier, you'd be going between these 2. Maybe if it's a purely single target fight, you go for that. But yeah, it seems interesting. I'm a little confused why they have these 2 AoE nodes and then just that thrown in there. That seems kind of odd. Shimmer, again, we've seen that. Nothing different. Nothing different on Cauterize, nothing different on Ice Block. Note again that there is the artifact, which is when you blink you heal. So that potentially might be quite powerful, depending on how good of a heal that is. You maybe take it, but again, assuming the other 2 will just be better. But, you know, for world content soloing, it might be good. Mirror image hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. A bit boring. Hasn't changed. Right, Flame On. 30 seconds. When activated, grants 2 charges of Inferno Blast. Inferno Blast is here. This is a forced crit. So basically what it is you do Inferno Blast. That is your Pyro Blast. You force the Pyro Blast. Usually what you do is you spam Fireball, wait for 1 crit, then you Inferno Blast, you force it into a Pyro, throw out the Pyro. If you then had this on, you would then use the Inferno to force the second. And basically what that does is it means that you can chain force Inferno Blast. If you need a Pyro, you press this, you reset it. So you could open a fight with Inferno Blast, Pyro, press this, Inferno Blast, Pyro. You know, it's good if you need that, like, sudden burst on a new ad or something. When you gain Heating Up, there's a chance to instantly go into Hot Streak. This chance is increased by your crit strike. Again, Hot Streak is the second, yeah. Because when you get your first crit, that's Heating Up. Your second crit is Hot Streak. So that is amazing, actually, because when you cast a Pyro, there's a chance you basically get another Pyro. Yeah, that's really good. And this is increased by your crit strike. So basically this just becomes better the further into the expansion you are. But rotational-wise, it might be a bit iffy because so much of fire is controlled about, you know, forcing that second crit. It might be a bit iffy that, you know, you're going into it and this procs. Hopefully it's got a big animation, like a big thing on your screen so you notice it. But cool. Blast Wave. Cause an explosion around the target enemy or ally, dealing 2% of spell damage. All enemies, reducing movement speed. Primary basically is that the same, except for it's a slow instead of a knock-up. Hasn't changed. Again, it just seems weird. You could make the argument that it's only a slow, not like a hard CC, so maybe you'd want the other 2 more often. But you, like, come on, like, no one wants to not have Blast Wave to get one of these 2. If there is a case where you have to take Ice Water, for example, let's say that we go into, you know, old school style of we need to kite the ads around the room and you need the double frost nova, you'll feel bad. Like, you'll want Blast Wave. So, you know, a little disappointed by that tier again. Living Bomb instant. Your targets become a living bomb, taking 100% of spell damage, fire damage. When this effect ends, or the target dies, it explodes. Big explosion, aims at the spell power to the target and all other enemies within 12 yards. May be spread by Inferno Blast. Wow, so you press Living Bomb, you Inferno Blast, it goes on to everyone. Basically, insane AoE. Unstable Magic, I do not see how this could ever be better than this. Hang on. Dealing an additional 50% damage to the target and to all other enemies within 8 yards. I mean, unless you have crazy haste, I mean, this is just good in single target scenarios, I suppose, because there's a 30% chance on Fireball that it just explodes on the main target again, and this is going to only really be very good in cases where there's at least one other mob, so you can have a Living Bomb on both, they explode on each other. Flame Strike ignites the ground that it's cast on, leaving a patch of fire behind which continues to burn enemies in it for X per seconds. The next 15 seconds doesn't stack. Again, this is probably quite good just in a single target scenario, and again, this will synergize quite well with Aftershocks. depending on if it triggers instantly or if there's a delayed trigger, it might actually refresh the flame patch. So imagine it lasts 15 seconds, but if Flame Strike continues to proc for like, 3 times a few second delay, it will add a few seconds onto the end of this, if that makes sense. But yeah, seems pretty cool. I imagine this is just better though. You have to manage it, I suppose. You have to physically spread it, whereas this is just a passive, and that's just a passive. So again, you go into that. It rewards skilled play versus unskilled play. I don't know. Your Fireball, Frostfire Bolt, so you're keeping Frostfire Bolt, Pyroblast, Inferno, Critical Strikes reduce the cooldown, remaining on combustion by 1 second. That's pretty strong. And again, there is a legendary item, which is when you Pyroblast, you reduce the cooldown on combustion by 3 seconds. So this plus that equals you combust all day, every day. Cinderstorm, 8-second cooldown. Throw a spread of 6 cinders that travel in an arc, and each deal for 12 damage to easily hit. Now they say an arc without actually seeing the animation. We don't know if it will be able to hit multiple times, like if it's a turning or if it spins or if it's just it goes out like that. Seems cool. Basically a move added to the rotation. Yep. A meteor calls down a meteor which lands at the target location for 3 seconds, does a load of damage, split evenly. Oh, I wish they would drop that. Between all targets in 8 yards, also as the ground. Okay. The reason why I wish they would remove that split evenly is often what happens is this is great in single target, and then once you get to oh, there are 5 ads, it's just useless because it's spread, but usually you don't want to kill ads at the same time. Usually there's one you want to kill. So you basically run Meteor for single target, Cinderstorm for AoE, and Kindling once you have X amount of haste, I suppose, or if you don't have the legendary. And for people who go, what legendary? Basically, you're getting legendaries as world drops. I made a video on it. You can see it on my channel, and it goes over the 3 Fire Mage legendaries, which were all about Pyroblast, Combustion, and Flame Strike. So, slightly more interesting, I think, than the Arcane ones. To me, it seemed like some of the Arcane ones were a bit more passive. Again, it could just be because I'm a Fire fanboy. I'm slightly more drawn to these because I've played way more Fire than I have played Arcane. So yeah, decent. Although, come on Blizz, let's sort out these boring tiers, yeah? Cool. And we're back with Philomelorn, which was Kel'Thas Sunstrider's sword, which he used to try and beat up Arthas, which didn't go too well for him. Already, I've got to say, this is... I might just be a Fire fanboy, but this looks a lot more interesting to me than the staff. It's a more interesting design. If we just quickly jump back up to Arcane, can you see how some of these just look like generic caster staffs? And then you have this, it looks like a sword, but it doesn't look like it's meant for melee combat. Does that make sense? It looks like an Arcanist's weapon rather than a sword you bash someone on the head with. I really like this colouring. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Big fan. You can hear my cat playing something in the background. Ooh, that's nice. Yeah, you've got to say, that's a good looking weapon, yeah. And again, kind of low res images. This glow pulses up and down the center of the blade from what we've seen from short videos of these. Not too sure on this one. Again, you'd have to see the animation. I'm assuming with the animation, it looks less like a weird web. I can see that looking good, but I'm more of a fan of these cleaner edges. And then sort of like a weird corrupted sort of. It reminds me of the Deathwing weapons. Not too sure about this one. This one looks pretty... Again, we've got to see the animation, because a lot of this weapon is it's a gentle, pulsing glow on it. Ooh, I do like these. They give me sort of a Titan feel to them. No, these are nice. And we do have offhands. Now, I'm going to say, I'm a little bit disappointed by the offhands. I was kind of hoping we would just have a sword. I don't think we needed... a little orb thing. Because some of them look good, some of them look kind of stupid. And I'm just going to actually go through these. Like that. It's just it's kind of boring. boring. Like, you've got this really cool weapon, and then you've got that, and it's just like, I don't know, like, do you guys think we needed offhands? I really don't think we did. Some of these ones, you can see the animation in it, you can sort of imagine how it would look. I'm a little bit more of a fan of these, but I'd like to be able to hide the offhand. That one looks quite cool. You can sort of see it's got these, like, runes in it. I'll be interested to see if we can mix and match the offhand to the weapon. So, if we have the weapon skin set to, for example, this model, does that automatically swap to the corresponding offhand, or can we choose which one? That'd be interesting. These, and then, I mean, come on, what's that? Like, I'm assuming it looks good with animation, but that's low res. Like, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. Right, let's jump up to Frost, and let's get the Frost out of the way. So, weapons, bigger fan of them. Offhands, not that big of a fan. Artifacts, nodes, best so far. Let's see if the Frost can compete. So, replaces your Frostbolt with Ebon Bolt. I'm assuming it's just like a reskinned version. We'll see when we go to the talents. We'll go into the Frost tree and see what Ebon Bolt does. Increase the damage of your Frostbolt by X. Increase the damage of Frozen Orb by X. Increase the crit damage, X. Increase the critical strike damage, X. On Frostbolt crits, the cooldown of your Icy Veins is reduced by seconds. That's interesting. Crit seems to be your main stat. Which is interesting, because you're going to have both fire and crit. Sorry, both fire and frost heavily favouring crit. Which is going to make gear swapping really easy, which is nice. And then we're going to have Arcane probably just being Mastery and Haste, I would assume. Because again, multi-strike is gone, so Frost won't be stacking multi-strike anymore for obvious reasons. Increase the chance to trigger Brain Freeze by X. Increase the critical strike chance of Blizz by X. Increase the magnitude of your Ice Barrier by X. Reduce damage by X. Your Frostbolt critical strikes apply empowered Ice Lance, doubling the damage of your next Ice Lance. It would have been cooler if, like, your Frostbolt crit means you chain loads of Ice Lances rather than just, like, does more damage. Successful interrupt to reset your cooldowns. That's cool. Which cooldowns? We have to know which cooldowns. I do really like that. We're seeing a lot of this with some classes where they're trying to promote good interrupt gameplay. What I am not looking forward to are the rage on TS when, you know, someone's stolen your interrupt and they've, like, nerfed your damage into the ground. That will be quite funny. When you've got, like, Demon Hunters, if they interrupt, they fully gain all of their resource, which is huge. And you've got, like, all the Demon Hunters and all the Mages, like, arguing about who gets to interrupt the next ability. So that'll be funny. Black Icicle, your frost spells also generate an unconsumable black icicle which triggers of its own volition. Sounds cool. So unlike how icicles currently work, where, like, you throw out your ice lance and they all shoot off, you're gonna get a giant, I'm assuming it's gonna be like this giant big black icicle above your character. Yeah, and then it will just randomly go off and do loads of damage. It sounds cool, but I can imagine it also being quite frustrating if, you know, it goes off at the wrong time. So imagine in PvP, you're about to get the kill, you've got the guy on 20%, he's not getting killed, the icicle is just floating, he then gets healed, then it goes off, takes him back down to 20, like, come on. Or in raiding, you know there's an ad about to spawn, and then the icicle shoots off just before the ad spawns, or it goes onto the wrong target. So it sounds cool, but I can imagine it's going to cause a lot of headaches. So I'm not too sure about that one, Blizzard. But I like the idea. I think the idea is very cool. But I feel like you should be able to force the move. Because if you can't force the move, then people are just going to rage about it. Wow. Activating Icy Veins encases you in ice, increasing your frost damage dealt by 100%. Cool. Hopefully it has a really, really cool animation to go with it. So, pretty cool. Yeah, a lot of boring. Like, you don't need all of these increased X damage. Just copy this, right? Interesting. There is, like, 3 interesting things in here. Like, there's this is cool, this is cool, and then maybe this one. So there's 4 interesting, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Like, no. Compare that to Fire Mage, where there's like 3 boring ones. Come on, guys. Sort that out, you know. Right, let's jump over to Frost. And let's quickly go through here just to have a look at that spell we were interested in. Have they got Ebb and Bolt in here? They probably don't. No. You have very little spells in your spellbook. Okay. So, Ray of Frost, D3 anyone? Channel a Ray of Frost at the target, slowing the target by 30%, dealing a load of spell damage. Wow. Target over 20 seconds, this damage is dealt increase the longer the ray is channeled. 20-second cast. That's a long time to be casting. You're going to feel really bad if that gets interrupted. Or if the tank moves it out of range. Still, very powerful ability. Bit boring, actually. Like, do you want to spend 20 seconds doing this? Like, I'm assuming it's got a really cool animation, so it's like... And then, you know, a whole tornado of ice is around your character. But 20-second cast... I think it'd probably be better if it was a series of shorter casts on a shorter cooldown, which you could then, like, build more into your rotation, rather than just oh, they've popped last. Like, is that fun? I don't know if that's fun. Yeah, no. And also, whenever you need to move... Lonely Winter. You can no longer summon your water elemental. However, Frostbolt, Ice Lance, and Frozen Orb deal 10% more damage. You also learn the ability to cast Freeze. Cool. So basically, you get the second Nova that your pet had. This is really good for people who don't like managing their pets, which is most people, because the pet AI is useless. And yeah, it's basically Lone Wolf for Frost Mages. It's good. Bone Chilling. Whenever you attempt to chill a target, you chill yourself with a stacking debuff. The higher the debuff, the more damage all your frost spells deal, but the slower you move. Very cool thematically. You would never use this in PvP. You would never use this on 5-mans because you just won't be able to keep up with the group. You would never use this in any raid fight which required movement. You would use it on single target fights which don't require movement. And then it's very good. I find it interesting that you basically have 2 abilities which stop you from moving, because we don't know how much of a snare this is. Like, this might only be like, oh, you just move 10% slower. Like, it might be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then caps at 10%, or it might cap at 50% slow. We don't know. But all of your spells apply chill, I think. Like Frostbolt, Ebb and Bolt, all of that stuff. I'm assuming it all applies chill. I'm assuming it's not just like when you only use Nova. So, seems cool, but not that useful. Much like this. This seems really cool, but I can't think of many scenarios where you can actually just go... So you basically just take this. And this is actually kind of boring. So... I like this talent because it means you don't need to have the water rally if you don't want to take the water rally, but I think most people are just going to be forced into this talent because it's a flat 10% damage buff, and it doesn't come with a downside. Both of these come with downsides. They're both really cool though, so we might need to see some tweaks on it, but yeah, a little bit thrown off by that first row. Hasn't changed, hasn't changed, hasn't changed. Hasn't changed. I wonder if you can do ice flows, if that will work with Ray of Frost. I'm assuming it would. So, if you take Ray of Frost, you basically have to take ice flows. And in that case, it could be good. But I don't think it would work with... Because it's your next spell, and that's a channel. So, I don't think it will work, so... I really want Ray of Frost to work, because I think it'll be a really cool ability, but I just don't know how you can afford to channel for that long. And because if it didn't have a cooldown attached to it, it would be fine, because you just work into your rotation when you can. But the fact it has a 1-minute cooldown, you can't just, like, YOLO throw it out, then have to interrupt it. Again, and also, since the damage ramps up over time, there'll be a thing like you need to channel for at least 8 seconds, for example, for it to be worthwhile, because the first X amount of seconds just won't deal any damage at all. So a little bit confused by that. So in the Incanter's Flow tier, that hasn't changed. These two have. So Frozen Touch, 30-second cooldown. When activated, you generate 2 charges of Fingers of Frost. Seems okay. Bitter Cold, increases damage of Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb now generates 2 charges of Fingers of Frost when it hits. Yeah, this seems more interesting, this one here, the Bitter Cold to Incanter's Flow. I've never been that much of a fan of Incanter's Flow. You at least have some control over when you generate those charges. Same again with that. If you need to force the fingers, you have the option. So, yeah. Okay-ish. Ice Nova, 25-second cooldown. Again, note how there aren't like 2 charges of it. Cause a whirl of icy wind around the target. Enemy or ally, dealing a bunch of spell damage. All enemies, freezing in place for 2 seconds. Take 100%. Hasn't really changed. Ring of Frost, Ice Ward. You know how I feel, so I'm not going to make you go sit through that again. Places a Frost Roll on the target for 12 seconds. Limits 1 target. Your Ice Lance that benefit from Shatter will trigger the release of a wave of freezing ice, dealing 100% of spell power to the target. Frost damage to all their enemies within 12 yards. Good. We don't know the numbers. 1.5-second cast grants X haste plus consume all frozen effects and gain haste for every effect consumed. I think that's good. The only issue with it, voice, but sorry, we're getting to the end. The only issue with it is that freeze breaks on damage. So in a raid scenario, if you throw this on a bunch of ads, the ads, like someone will break your freeze, and this isn't instant. This has a cast attachment. So you freeze the ads, someone DPS the ad, they're no longer frozen. PvP, much of the same. So it's only going to be good in maybe like 2s or maybe 3s and solo content. I think the other 2 are just better. But it's an interesting idea. If it was instant, so you could do like Frost over this, then that'd be cool. Because again, it consumes the freeze, so they're no longer frozen anymore. So there could then be gameplay about running Ice Ward in this, so like you Nova, instantly break the Nova, and then you get this buff. So that's interesting. Casting Ice Lance extends your Icy Veins for 2 seconds. Icy Veins is the best thing in the game, so you probably just take that because Icy Veins just is so powerful. Let's see if we can read what the cooldown on it is these days. So 3-minute cooldown these days. Last 20 seconds. I think you probably just take that. I don't know. I mean, it's a 3-minute cooldown which gives you 30% haste and 100% more damage, which is huge. And you'll be casting Icy Veins in your butt. Well, you won't be, actually, if you're using Ray of Frost. That's problematic. But like, assuming you're in a raid, you're on the pull, and you're on the lust, you will be casting Icy Lance anyway, so you want to be extending it. So, I don't know. So yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Glacial Spike. 3-second cast, quite a long one. Conjure a massive spike of ice and merge your current icicles into it. I wonder if that will also affect the black icicle, I'm not sure. It impales your target, dealing 500% of spell power damage, plus the damage stored in your icicle, so a lot. And you need 5 icicles to cast it, so you can't like force it on 3, you need that full 5. Also freezes the target in place for 4 seconds, damage caused may interrupt the effect. Passive Ice Lance no longer launches icicles. So if you use this, the only way of shooting your icicles out is through this. Basically, it seems like a really cool ability. If it also puts the black icicle into it, it'd be a good way of managing that ability so it's not a headache. Seems like a very cool. I can imagine this, like, you have all they channel forward and it's Hadoukens. I can imagine the animation. I can see that being cool. I like the spell, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Cormorant Storm, 30-second cooldown, instant. Cools down a series of 7 icy comments on and around the target, each of which does 100% of spell damage, frost damage, split between all enemies within 4 yards of its impact. Stop splitting it. If it's too strong, nerf it, and then, you know, you just use it as whatever. So this is your single target move, if you don't want to be worrying about that. This is if you want to extend your burst. So this is like sustained damage, this is sustained damage, this is sustained damage instant, this is sustained damage rotation, and this is Burst. Yeah, there seems to be some interesting gameplay. I'm still really not sure about this row, but it's a very cool row. I think this is probably the best of the 100 tier, because there's clear, you know, you can see when one is better than the other. This is interesting, but I'm not sure about it. Again, Blizz, sort out this whole, you know, same thing going on. It's kind of boring. Right, let's look at the weapons. Not sure about this row. I like this one because it actually looks like a Frost Mage weapon. This one is cool, but it doesn't scream Frost to me. This just looks like, you need to see the animation. It kind of just looks like that just looks like a weird Christmas tree. But I can imagine it looks cool, right? I do like this one. I do really like that one. I know I just went on about like it needs to look icy, but that is, yeah, I like that. Ooh, that's nice as well. Okay, so ignore everything I said. The ones that I like the most aren't even like frosty coloured, but it's, I think what I like about it is a lot of these weapons in general, I feel like I've seen them in the game before, but some of these colour palettes I haven't seen. Like, I haven't seen many weapons with that colour palette. I definitely haven't seen many weapons with this palette. This looks more like a spear to me. I can imagine this like being a very cool monk weapon. But yeah, so I still think the Fire Mage are my favourite artifacts. I still think Fire has by far the most interesting artifact traits. And I think, depending on how this row works out, it's between Fire and Frost for me on which has the more interesting talents. But by far I'm just drawn to Fire, but I'm a Fire fanboy, so that makes sense. I'm Tarke Cat. Apologies for the bad voice and all the snivelling. Thanks for sticking through. We're going to have another one of these up tomorrow, so please subscribe if you enjoyed this video, hopefully with a better vocal cords. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.